Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka 2 is a rematch of the ages where both fighters stood up to save another event. They both fought on UFC 300, and 2.5 months later, now they're going to be fighting on UFC 303. Pereira is coming off a couple injuries with his toes. Jiri Prochazka seems to be okay, and he did take a lot of punches to the face, but showing his granite chin, he was able to walk through all of that and autistically beat down Alexander Rakic. But does that same kind of game plan work against someone as powerful as Pereira? I don't think so, man. It doesn't really matter how good your chin is. You cannot just walk down Alex Pereira like that and throw hands with him. It's very, very difficult to do so. Pereira just possesses otherworldly power that Jiri Prochazka is even saying that Pereira is tapping into some like voodoo magic that helps him in his fights. He is serious about it too. Jiri Prochazka is literally saying that Pereira is working with shamans from Brazil to help him win the fights, and he hopes that Pereira doesn't do that for the rematch. So we have the chi and the chakra from Jiri Prochazka versus the shaman magic from Alex Pereira. This fight is really a spiritual battle, some kind of crazy anime fight. That's what this reminds me of. But let's talk about Alex Pereira's chances and how he can defeat Jiri Prochazka once again. So we know for certain that Jiri cannot just walk him down, exchanging with him as the best possible way to win the fight. I mean, Jiri could potentially pull it off because he does hit very hard, but it would mean that he would not get hit once. If Pereira touches that chin, Jiri is going to hit the deck. So that means that Jiri would have to play this perfectly, not getting hit at all, if he does want to walk him down, just like he did Rakic. Now, I don't expect him to do so. I expect him to fight somewhat similar to the first time he went up against Pereira, with a lot more wrestling, because that was the area where he had a lot of success. Whether it was actually taking Pereira to the ground, which he did in the first round, Pereira was eventually able to stand up, and he almost did get that guillotine, which is another danger here for Jiri, because Pereira has been working a lot on his grappling, and he's technically a black belt on the ground. And it wouldn't surprise me if he actually commits to some of these submissions in the rematch, because Jiri is most likely going to wrestle a lot more than he did the first time. But even on the ground, Pereira did show a way to get back up to his feet. It looked like he tried to go for the left overhook, eventually grabbed around the head and just stood up. He's not the most technical wrestler, but he is a very big and strong guy, seems to outweigh Jiri by nearly 20 pounds. But again, it wasn't just a takedown for Jiri Prochazka that proved to be successful. His wrestling was also shown when he would fake the takedowns, ducking his head at Pereira to throw in an uppercut that caught him on the chin, because the fake there is going to cause Pereira's hands to separate away from his head, creates an opening for some kind of follow-up punch for Jiri to land. Sometimes Pereira will drive his hips away thinking it's going to be a takedown, so he doesn't want his hips to be attacked. And if he does drive his hips away like that, it's going to make it harder for him to move his head away from a punch. That's how Jiri was able to land the uppercut in that moment. Or faking another takedown by ducking his head, Pereira giving a similar kind of reaction there, driving his hips away, moving his hands away from his head from defending himself. Then Jiri postures up for a follow-up left hook instead of the uppercut. And there's many more different kind of attacks that Jiri can work with there, whether it's a jab, it could be a right overhand, kind of similar to what Chad Mendes used to do sometimes, or the follow-up uppercut, maybe getting Pereira to duck his head more and to get intercepted by the punch. He could work with upward elbows, like crazy stuff that we've seen from different fighters in the past. So what does this mean for Pereira? He needs to get a lot more comfortable with wrestling overall, whether it's a committed takedown shot from Jiri, or he's just faking them to follow up with punches. This works so well against Pereira because he has to respect the wrestling so much, being one of the weaker wrestlers in the light heavyweight division. So the more he works in that area, over time, Pereira's going to be harder to wrestle and even harder to trick with fake takedowns. And he has to expect from Jiri that fake takedowns are also going to be presented. So that means he can intercept with an uppercut, he can sprawl a lot better, be more comfortable with just his footwork to get away from takedowns, which is ultimately the best thing for Pereira to do in these kind of scenarios. And what it all really comes down to is Pereira needs to get used to Jiri Prochazka's movements, rhythms, and openings. And the reason why he has such a harder time against Jiri before is because he didn't have a good feeling of Jiri compared to how he will now in the rematch, right? He has the experience and now feeling that guy's rhythm and how he fights. Because Jiri is an enigma. He's such a chaotic, wild fighter. Fighting him the first time is so difficult because you just don't know what he's going to do in front of you. It's hard to game plan against him. So everything just really comes down to experiencing fighting him to fight Jiri Prochazka. And now that Pereira does have that, he knows how Jiri fights. He's going to be more comfortable in the rematch against him compared to when he fought him the last time. And you saw it actually throughout their first fight that he was getting more comfortable in seeing the openings of Jiri, feeling his speed, his power, the way he dips his head, and all these different techniques that he uses. Pereira was doing a much better job on capitalizing on these moments the longer the fight played out. Earlier in the fight, he really wasn't doing much except throwing leg kicks, which he has an advantage against most guys he fights. So it doesn't really matter if it's against Jiri or against Jan Blachowicz, whoever it is, he's always going to be throwing leg kicks at you. So he went to the weapon that he's just most comfortable with from a distance. But throughout the fight, you start to see him throw a lot more shots out there off of different openings that he saw. Like for instance, Jiri switches stances from orthodox to southpaw, right? So in this moment here, he has his right hand forward. And the natural thing that both fighters will do is hand fight with each other. The lead hands are touching so they can feel out or see some kind of opening on each other while blocking the lead hand. So a lot of this is going to be dependent on the power punch or if they could trick the opponent with the whole hand fighting thing, which Pereira actually does. So in this moment where they're both hand fighting, nothing really happens for Pereira. He doesn't attack anywhere. He's just downloading data and just feeling out this madman style. And then later in the fight, when Jiri takes southpaw again, they both go to hand fight. But Pereira tricks Jiri. As Jiri and Pereira are bringing their hands forward in front of each other, Pereira understands that Jiri is opening up his center and his stance for an attack on the inside. And that is why Pereira brings his hand on the inside of Jiri Prochazka's lead and jabs straight at his face. That is one read that he made off of what Jiri Prochazka likes to do, because it's generally Jiri's stance that allows him to do this. He gets a lot wider when he's hand fighting, creating a bigger opening on the center. Or what about all the times that Jiri was blitzing him with those crazy punches like overhands and straights and just walking Pereira back to the fence, throwing combinations at him? For the first few of those, Pereira didn't really do much to counter them. He was kind of just moving away because he got overwhelmed and didn't see the openings yet. Again, Jiri is very unpredictable when you're fighting him the first time, and that's why Pereira didn't counter anything until where he knocked him out. That's where it became a bit different. So the first few blitzing combinations from Jiri were not being countered. He was able to just throw his hands at Pereira and Pereira backs up to the fence. Look what happens at the ending though, when Jiri tries it again. Jiri's in the southpaw stance. They both go to hand fight each other, but now Jiri is the one that attacks first. He throws a long left straight by stepping on the outside foot there. Look how his lead foot is on the right side of Alex Pereira's. This is going to open up his left hand down the center and also take his head away from Pereira's right hand. This is going to cause Pereira to start stepping backwards, and Jiri carries on with that momentum. He throws a hopping jab. This is very different than your usual conventional jab. He is hopping with his entire body behind it to cover as much distance as possible and carrying as much momentum forward for all of his power to try to knock Pereira out. Then he also hops again for the right overhand, trying to get that knockout, and it's a shorter hop but still propelling forward with his entire body. But notice something about Pereira. He moves his head with the punch. Before the punch ever connects, look how Pereira's head is moving to his own right side, rotating his own head away from that right hand. This greatly reduces the impact of that punch. If he never turned his head, he could have gotten knocked out by that. That was a very, very powerful punch that Jiri threw at him, and Jiri hits very hard. He's still the only fighter that has ever knocked Volkan Oezdemir out. And when you look at everybody Volkan fought, that's an extremely impressive feat of the power he has in his punches. So Pereira did a really good job there on moving his head, which a lot of people do not give him credit for. And it's not the only time. Jiri follows it up with the left straight as he's switching stances forward. Not the most powerful punch. He's kind of just following it up to get back into his stance behind it and carry on that forward momentum, constantly backing up Alex Pereira so he can keep the power punches flowing. And when Pereira knows that he's close to the fence, he stands his ground in front of Jiri and again moves his head with the follow-up right hand. Jiri is looking to knock him out once again with the right overhand. The same exact punch, and Pereira moves his head with it the exact same way again. Look how Pereira leans away, rotates his head to the right side as well, causing the overhand from Jiri to just touch him. And he knows that Jiri is going to overextend forward, just like he did with the entire combination, because Jiri's all about that forward momentum. But if you miss your punches with that forward momentum, you're going to get off balance, you're going to get out of your stance, and ultimately become defenseless. Alex Pereira understood that in the moment, avoided most of the power from that punch, and countered Jiri with the right straight left hook combination, sending him to the canvas, and the precision of that left hook was impeccable right there. First touches him right on the chin as Jiri's head is moving into that side because of the right hand hitting him that direction. So you see the adjustments that Alex Pereira is making while he's trying to understand Jiri Prochazka's style. He didn't do this when Jiri was trying to blitz him before. He had to feel it out at first, and now in the rematch, he has his all understood. So these kind of counters from Pereira are going to be a lot more dangerous in the second fight because he doesn't need that much more time to understand the unpredictability of Jiri Prochazka. And like, for instance, some of the other stuff that Jiri was doing when he has all this funky head movement, he's constantly moving his head all over the place. Pereira understood, okay, I'm not going to punch him in the head. I'm just going to jab him to the body. It doesn't matter. His head is dipping and dodging all over the place. His body is going to be right there. I'm just going to target that. Jiri's not moving his body in the same way. He's just moving his head. And Alex Pereira has one of the best body jabs in the UFC. He's one of the only fighters that consistently goes to it. It's a very underrated punch that a lot of fighters don't throw. And Pereira could potentially follow up on this if Jiri doesn't step away from the jab after it connects. But it does a really good job on getting Jiri away from him, giving Pereira more space, and ultimately breaking any kind of pressure that Jiri's putting on him. So if like Jiri's walking him down and Pereira's backing up and Jiri's moving his head all over the place, Pereira could just body jab him to get Jiri off of him. And we know the leg kick is going to be a major component in Pereira potentially beating Jiri again. In fact, Alexander Rakic 2.5 months ago was destroying Jiri's legs with leg kicks, and that's a guy everybody knows has a very powerful leg kick as well. So it goes to show that even though Jiri knows that his opponent has really good leg kicks, he still doesn't really defend them, and that potentially can go for the rematch against Pereira again. He might still get his legs chopped up, even though he knows his opponent is going to try to kick his legs out. Jiri did get away from a few leg kicks. He mainly did it by just stepping away from Pereira, which he could also do in the rematch, but man, 1 or 2 of those is enough damage to just change Jiri throughout the fight. In fact, both Rakic and Pereira caused a tremendous amount of damage on that lead left leg with only like 2 leg kicks. That's crazy. But just like Jiri can know to just step away from those, Pereira can also know not to throw them naked like that without any setups, because that was mostly when Jiri was getting away from the leg kicks. And not only that, Pereira can also fake the leg kick by driving his hips forward. He did that once in the fight and continue with a combination over the top. It depends what he throws and how Jiri reacts to the fake leg kick. If he moves his leg away and exposes his head, which is actually a very similar reaction that Pereira can give him for the fake takedowns, then Pereira can literally left hook him in the face and knock him out right from there. But if Jiri just steps away completely, then there's not a combination Pereira can land on him, but that would break Jiri's pressure and rhythm and get him to start backing away. And that is the ultimate thing here. The fact that Pereira has a better understanding of Jiri going into the rematch, considering that one of the biggest advantages for Jiri Prochazka is the fact that he's so unpredictable, you can't really game plan against him. You kind of just have to go in there and fight the guy. The fact that Pereira did that and won, he has a much better understanding of what he has to do in the second fight compared to when he had no idea on what to do before he stepped in there the first time. So now he knows that Jiri drops his hands all the time. When he's throwing punches forward, he likes to work off forward momentum, which causes a lot of overextension, leaving openings for the left hook counter. The leg kicks are always going to be there as long as Pereira doesn't make them very obvious. The body jabs are always going to be there. Whenever Jiri is dipping his head all over the place, the body jabs are going to be there as a counter punch. Hand fighting with Jiri from a distance, when he's southpaw, is going to create an opening for Pereira to enter on the inside with the jab, and he could follow up with the right straight afterward. And he could potentially just counter or intercept the head movement of Jiri when he's dipping all over the place with a head kick or a knee. In fact, he tried to do that at one point and almost caught Jiri clean with it. Jiri was able to block it with one hand, and he acknowledged Pereira like, okay, that was a good one. And when it comes to the wrestling, he has to get a lot more comfortable in that area than he is, right? The mental part of that is such a big thing for him to get over, on not giving Jiri's wrestling as much respect as he does. So I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown, and if you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.